we'll go ahead and get started. Again, good afternoon. My name is Seneca Edwards Heron, and I am the founder and executive director of Freedmen Heirs Foundation. Today, our webinar session will feature Dr. TJ Bradford from Vayda. And the topic of our webinar is one that is very timely, from the soil up, making the case for regenerative agriculture. Now, we all know in this ag space, we've been hearing that term for quite some time. So I am very excited to hear the information that Dr. Bradford plans to lay out for us. Before we move forward, I want to just touch bases on a few housekeeping, and then we can move forward with the webinar. First things first, this webinar is being recorded and it will be posted to our website as well as our YouTube channel. In addition, everyone that's registered for this webinar this afternoon will receive an email with the link to the webinar recording. All attendees' cameras are off and microphones are muted. The chat and Q&A function, they're enabled, so feel free to engage with us. And we're going to hold all of our questions to the end of Dr. Bradford's presentation. So a little bit about us. Freedmen Heirs Foundation, we are a nonprofit organization with a mission and vision to support Black farmers with access to technical assistance, funding resources or financial assistance, as well as new market opportunities. We have a mission and a vision that's focused around eliminating inequities in agriculture by bridging the gap between two worlds, Black farmers and the marketplace. We strive to be a sounding board, a beacon of hope, and a light for those in underserved communities and for producers that need support outside of some of your more traditional and conventional ways. So I am going to go in introducing Dr. Bradford. First and foremost, I would like to say that Dr. Bradford is from Mississippi, as I am also, and you all might know that. And we both went to Mississippi State University. So that says a lot about Mississippi State University, Hail State. But Dr. Bradford is the Director of Strategic Partnerships at Vayda. His goal is to cultivate relationships across various agricultural industries, to execute strategies for advancing regenerative agriculture. Previously, he served as Vayda's Director of Agronomy as he oversaw all agronomic operations and created guidelines to implement on Vayda's proving ground farms to define, integrate, and measure regenerative impact, sustainability, and productivity. Before his role at Vayda, Dr. Bradford was the Director of Farm Transition for Animal Outlook, where he worked to create blueprints and strategies for farmers who desire to exit the animal agribusiness sector and enter a more environmentally friendly and sustainable plant-based alternative. Dr. Bradford had previously served as faculty in the Department of Plant and Soil Sciences at Mississippi State University. He was responsible for teaching undergraduate and graduate courses in precision agriculture and vegetable production, and was employed by the United States Department of Agricultural Natural Resource Conservation Service as a soil conservationist and soil scientist. He has been stationed at various duty stations in Mississippi and in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, Crestview, Florida, and Saratoga, Wyoming. A native of Jackson, Mississippi, TJ is a fifth-generation farmer and grew up in Isola, Mississippi. He possesses a bachelor's and master's of science in agronomy and a doctorate in agricultural sciences from Mississippi State University. So I am not going to hold you all any longer. I am going to pass the baton to Dr. Bradford, and TJ, I'll stop sharing my screen right now.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you for having me on, and I'm excited to talk about our content today. Like you mentioned, regenerative ag, and anytime I see some other Mississippi State folks in the chat too. So Hail State, and once we are amongst familiar friends, I like that. So yeah, so I'm gonna share my screen and with our programming today. Like I said, I like talking about nerdy plant stuff and being able to do that. I just get excited about talking about plant stuff because I'm just a plant nerd is what I am. Um, so yeah, so like you mentioned, we've heard this term regenerative ag a lot. What does it mean? And it really it can mean a whole bunch of stuff depending on who you ask, and we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But I'm gonna go through a few slides and just kind of hitting some of the high points about regenerative ag, and then we'll just have some dialogue and we'll just talk. Um, so first, what we're going to do is I'm going to talk a little bit about, regenerative ag, some of the definition and soil health, and we'll talk about the benefits and some of the challenges that we have seen, throughout, just with Vayda, with our proven ground farms, in Clarksdale and in Newport, Arkansas. And we'll talk about some of the benefits as well, and we'll look at some of the concepts of regenerative ag, and we'll kind of talk about how we make regenerative ag work, and what that looks like. So just about Vayda, we're a ag tech company that we actually farm as well, about 5,600 acres. And we have our mission is, hey, we believe in regen ag because, it can help the business side of it. Because we're in a time where, we may have great yields, but the market may not look as well. So we try to balance that too. And the reason that we have those proven grounds farms is because, we didn't want to just be another agricultural group that doesn't have any skin in the game pretty much. And so when we actually farm for as an operation, so we can because we want to tie in the business aspects of farming with regenerative ag. We know that a lot of climate smart friendly practices and regenerative practices, they do, they can save the planet. And I say save the planet in the terms of, we only control what we can do. We can't control what other people do. And so we have to make sure that we're doing what we can that's environmentally friendly to be sustainable. And I'm a fifth generation farmer. And one of the reasons that I was tied to the group with Vayda is because to be able to do something like this in the Delta, it does protect legacies because my dad is the type where he's talking about, hey, this is your show to run, and I like to tell people, I say I'm not inheriting the land from my parents, I'm borrowing it from my children, and so I want to leave it in a place where they have something that's a lot better than what I've inherited. And what we've seen with regenerative ag, and part of our mission is we want to make sure we optimize the inputs and set the space for healthy margins because we're in the business of regen ag for the farming. And why we care about regen is because of the resilience and longevity of the sustainable practices that we're doing. We want to make sure we protect farmer profitability, so we're farmer first. And then we want to inspire not only the future generation, but the current generation of farmers to show how we can make this and implement this into our systems, and integrate this into our systems successfully. And because we're framed like we're framed, we have a three-tiered approach, and the foundation of it is science. Because, like I said, I'm a plant nerd, I'm a scientist, and what we do at Vayda is geared and rooted in science, and not just regular science, but the agronomic science of farming. Because we know farming is a completely different game. I like to say farming is an art-based science, and every farmer has their own flair and flavor, and then they integrate the science into that. And so that's kind of where we start with the science of it. And then building on that science, we have our services offering, which we'll talk about, right there at the end. Provide farmers with these tailored agronomic plans to say, hey, how can we integrate this from your current operation to go from whatever conventional system that you have to a more sustainable, regenerative, climate-friendly model. We're there step by step, and then we utilize technology to help us scale our offerings to make sure, because there's no one size fits all, but we want to make sure that we're taking the data from, even the past 100 years of climate data to put into these plans to help farmers to say, hey, we don't just use technology so that we can farm better. We use technology to enhance what we do. And so, Vayda, I'm glad that I'm not the only plant nerd on staff. We have a lot of other plant nerds, but we have people with doctorate degrees that head up our R&D, from other soil scientists, other agronomists. We have customer specialists that have been servicing the Mississippi Delta and surrounding areas for over 50 plus years, for more than 50 years. So we have a lot of experience, and we have farmers that are actually doing the farming with us, and so have over 100 years of experience just farming in the Mississippi Delta. Because I like, and I might be biased because I grew up in the Delta, but I feel like if you can make it in the Delta, you can make it anywhere. And so I feel the same way with farming. If you could farm in the Delta, you can farm anywhere. Um, but it just goes to a testament of kind of how we have the boots on the ground and what we're trying to do in the Mississippi Delta. And we also have, software engineers and business managers. I mean, I like to call it the Avenger Squad, because we brought together a whole bunch of people to make this happen. And it's really exciting what we get a chance to do. And kind of what we've seen is that when we got this farm in Clarksdale, it wasn't in the best shape. And so we had to use a lot of inputs when it came to some of our production, cost of production, corn and soybean. And what we've seen is that cost of those input costs start to be driven down, pretty significantly throughout the years. And this has to be updated. We have the actual numbers. We're still analyzing the data from the harvest this past year. We feel that that's a testament because of the inputs and the way that we look at nutrients, the way we look at kind of our weed management systems, and that's all within the approach that, hey, we don't, this isn't a one size fit all approach. And there are times that we got hit in the mouth with stuff, but we're very open and honest about why it is, why we found that. And so we have started to see these decreased input costs, and we hadn't sacrificed yield, which I know a lot of farmers like to hear about the yield. And I like to start with this picture. Everybody knows what this picture is. This is the Dust Bowl. And when I was working with the USDA, some of the first reading materials I had to read, and I got so tired of hearing about Hugh Hammond Bennett and his role in conservation and all this. But as it started off, the Soil Conservation Service, now the NRCS, this was their major problem. Because you move out, the settlers go out to the Midwest, they start breaking up ground that they hadn't been broken up before. They start tilling the soil, planting, got great production. And then they realize, well, that soil hadn't been disturbed, because you get 10, 12 inches of rain out there a year. And once that light friable sand, that light friable soil starts to dry out, then the wind takes it. And the wind takes the most productive soil that we want, that silt, and it just goes and it's deposited elsewhere. But a lot of folks think that this is the thing of the past. But this is not a thing of the past. We see what we call them dust devils growing up. We see them all the time. And I know our production practices on our farm and our solar, we did things because we just like to do them. Like we go out, we get on a tractor, and we disc up the field just because we like to smell the diesel. And so but we see different types of soil loss in a lot of different types of ways, from wind, water, and from the physical aspect. And what regenerative ag does is we seek to keep the soil in place through a lot of different techniques, through a lot of different philosophies. Because, like I said, there is no one size that fits all. But we want to make sure that we are doing the best thing, doing the right thing at the right place at the right time for each field. Because I think the fields are like children. Like, each one of them have its own personality, and you can't treat each one the same. But you have to do what you can from what you know to maximize the productivity of that field. And the reason that we have a lot of these, the lot of soil degradation, you probably heard of it that way. You have soil movement, soil loss, because we have enhanced erosion from a lot of things that we do. Not that I don't think farming is bad, but I think a lot of times that some of the practices that we do can aid in soil degradation. And so we remove plant matter, plant material, and it's like, hey, you got to have one without the other. But how do we blend this balance of the two? And it really is site specific. And so the challenges that we have on our farm is not going to be the same that of the challenges that are 3 miles away. And the big thing is, and I'm gonna try to get cute here. I don't know how this is gonna work, but I like to say that crop yield is a function of these three things. I hope everybody can see that. Is a function of genetics, is a function of the environment, and is the function of management. And as farmers and as scientists and as agronomists, we, from a practical aspect, I don't control the genetics. That's for the geneticists to do, and I'm thankful for the work that they do. We can't control the environment. I hadn't found anybody that can, call rain down when they need it. Typically we pray for rain and then it comes when we don't necessarily need it, but anyhow, it gets in the soil. So, crop yield is a function of these three things, but this management, this is what we can control. We can control what we do. And that's what regenerative ag is. Regenerative ag is a management philosophy that seeks to do the right thing in the right place at the right time within these specific conditions. I'm gonna try to delete that, clear all these drawings. Okay, it worked good. So we good to go. Um, And like I mentioned, so regenerative ag is a management philosophy that the aim is to improve soil health. And the soil health is literally it's just the fitness of a soil to do what it's supposed to do. If you think about, going to the gym, I like to go to the gym, I like to work out. Um, it's because I want to be in peak physical condition. The soil, we have to think about the soil in the same way. Soil health is making sure that soil is in peak physical condition because over time that soil we are taking things out of that soil but we have to put it back in a manner that's conducive to the whole system, and the way we do that is how we improve soil health. So at its core, we just want to restore certain degraded soil, certain aspects of soils by using management practices because we can't control the other two factors of that equation. And so what are these soil health principles? It's really four big ones. Regenerative ag has its tenets as well, but I kind of want to, we can just park here for a minute and, the main four, we want to minimize the disturbance. We want to maximize our soil cover. We want to maximize biodiversity, that's plants and insects. And then we want to maximize these continuous living roots because, if you have these continuous living roots or living roots as long as possible, it does so many great things for the soil, soil aggregation, soil structure, water infiltration, things of that nature. And when we think about this continual soil coverage, keeping these plants in place, what we want to do is when we keep these soil covered, it keeps these soil particles from going where we don't want them to go. By stats, agriculture is the largest non-point source polluter in the world. Farming is the largest non-point source polluter in the world. And I tell folks often that, you know, direct pollution is taking trash and throwing it right out the window. But non-point source pollution is, putting trash in the garbage bin and the wind is blowing 50 miles an hour. Now, that trash bin is going to blow over. But you say, hey, I put it in the trash. But it has off-target consequences. And when we keep these soil particles in place, it doesn't take those, it helps to minimize those off-target consequences, whether it's with fertilizer, anything like that. But our soil is our most valuable resource. And the acceptable range of soil loss per year by the USDA is 2 tons. That's a lot of soil. But if you continually lose 2 tons per year, it starts to have its effect on your productivity and your profit margin. And so we want to make sure that these areas of high erosion potential don't stay high for long. So utilizing different strategies when it comes to management that we can start to really decrease that amount of soil loss year after year. And sometimes and I'm not talking about going completely no-till because some people, when they think regenerative ag, they think we got to go no-till organic. You don't have to do this. It's not a silver bullet. We want to, make sure that we are doing the right thing at the right time. So sometimes it's reduced till, sometimes it's minimizing till, sometimes it's conservation tillage. It's different tillage practices that we make and wait for in the spring or the fall. But it comes with that tailored approach. So make sure that soil is covered, and one ways that we do this with the management practice are cover crops. Cover crops, they are going to help decrease the velocity of that raindrop so that raindrop doesn't hit the soil and detach and transport those soil particles everywhere else. But cover crops, they help with mitigate compaction, they protect the soil from degradation, and they decrease nutrient leaching because a lot of times fields are vulnerable to this velocity of the raindrop. And even with these level graded fields, which there are plenty of in the Delta, you still have soil loss because the water ponds up and it pools. And at the end of the year, you have producers in the ditch digging out the silt. Well, soil is moving, so we have to be cognizant of that. And I love cover crops, number one, because I love plants. I just absolutely love plants. You can blame my grandmother for that. She kind of got me started with plants and all that. But when you think about the benefits of cover cropping, we see kind of the different things that cover crops what they do, because when we don't have these living root systems, our microbial communities, they are affected and influenced a little bit. And we've seen some of that at Vayda with some of the work that we're doing with the different cover crop rates and the different cover crop species that we're using. We start to see the microbial population kind of go in flux with those. And then when it takes the time to get these cover crops establishment, there's work doing that we can't see. So regenerative ag is about doing the work on the above the ground, while the microbes do the work below ground. And from this image that you can see, different cover crops, they do different things because their root architecture. And so when it comes to water infiltration, those dynamics are a little bit different. If you look at, the forbs, those type of things, they can help with compaction issues. And so we try to keep these blends so that we can do the best thing for the crop while we're there. And then minimizing soil disturbance. So minimizing how many trips that we go across the field. And so with cover crop biomass, the goal for that in certain instances is, hey, we want to see weed suppression. And then from that weed suppression, if we have a decreased weed pressure early in the season, we can kind of mix up some of our herbicide treatments and some of our timings. At one of our proving ground farms, we had a great cover crop establishment, and we were able to kind of nix out our first post-emerge weed application, which usually does not happen in the Mississippi Delta. So we were able to take that whole application out. So that's a different trip across the field that we didn't have to do. This herbicide we didn't have to purchase. And so with those fewer trips across the field, you do have less potential for compaction, keeping in mind if everything, making sure we're doing everything else in conjunction. So that's fewer trips across the field. They help with that. And then if we have, lower compaction, that is going to help with water infiltration. That's going to help with soil aggregation. That's going to be help with nutrient uptake. So a lot of good things happen. And I'm not just calling out compaction because it's the big devil. It's one of them. There's so many, but I like to pick on compaction because, compaction is usually one of those large limiting factors in the Mississippi Delta, and we've seen it on our farm as well. And like I mentioned, when things are compacted, bad things happen just from a root growth and development standpoint. I mentioned water infiltration, the speed that water infiltrates through the field. One of the experiments that we were doing, because I was key part in R&D when we first got going. I did some experiments on water infiltration on a compacted soil, two similar soil types, fields adjacent to each other, literally right across the road from on our proving grounds farm in Clarksdale. One soil that had cover crops on it, similar soil type, did not have compaction. It took about 6 minutes to infiltrate 3 inches of water, and that was average because we did this 3 times. Same soil type, across the road, compacted soil. It took over 39 minutes for not even 1 inch of water to infiltrate. So soil compaction is a big deal, and so if water can't get in, the plant does struggle to take up what it does need, and we often see yield impacted in those compacted strips as well. And some farmers ask me, they say, hey, how do I alleviate compaction? We do have subsoilers. You can't pull subsoilers super fast, but when you utilize mechanical subsoiling techniques, that compaction, it does come back. It shows back up typically in the next year or the next 2 years. And so we want to make sure that that compaction doesn't show back up. And then nutrient management. For fertilizers, they make up about 30%, 20 to 35% of the farm budget, but the efficiency of these fertilizer applications are pretty low. And so even I think about when we fertilize corn, we have different inhibitors to help not to make sure that nitrogen doesn't volatilize into the atmosphere, that we don't lose it, but it's still relatively low. So 25 to 50%, that can almost make or break a farm budget when we look at that effectiveness. And we're putting a lot of fertilizer on just corn, for instance. But regenerative ag, what we try to do is we maintain we try to maintain the soil in the state, specifically from an organic perspective, so that these so that these compounds can actually break down so the plant can take them up when they want to. Now, there is an offset. You can't just say, hey, we can't just have this luxury consumption when you want to. We have to make sure it's in the soil profile. So making sure that we don't, negatively put out so much fertilizer that's ending up in a creek somewhere, that is ending up in a watershed somewhere and having these off-target effects. And so regenerative ag, from that holistic approach, it does increase efficiency as we start to knock these things down with cover cropping and nutrient management. And then, maximizing these plant diversity. I mean, this is kind of like the what I call like the beautiful aspect of cover cropping. And so when you start to see different ecosystems, what's more beneficial? You have your grasses, your legumes, what is the right mix? And when you go to in about Clarksdale Farm in the Delta, I was able to create certain mixes that aren't unique, that aren't kind of standard in the Mississippi Delta. And a lot of people say, I don't know if that's gonna work. And I'm like, trust me, plants are gonna grow, these are gonna work. And what we saw, especially at our field day last year, was the a landscape that's completely different, that allows for different insects, that allows for different microbial populations, because we do a lot of soil testing from the microbes perspective. And what we see is that different cropping systems attract different things, and different mixtures attract different things. And so that's just above ground, but below ground, these root architectures, they do so much for the soil profile, especially in some of these unforgiving delta soils that you just don't see anywhere else. But it comes with questions. It doesn't come without trade-offs. So it's like, hey, if I plant more species, then I got to think about, how do I terminate these multiple species, and what's the right time to terminate them, because we have so many different growth habitats. And if you got cereal rye over here, well, it needs to be terminated before it gets to this stage. But then, I didn't get my legumes to get enough biomass to fix enough nitrogen. But if I terminate it now, I got to terminate it because I'm getting ready to plant corn in 30 days, and I can't have this herbicide compound because it'll affect the corn. But I know, so many questions. But I think that's the beauty of knowing your fields. And again, as a soil scientist, when I go to a farmer's field, I take my sharpshooter, because I like to dig holes, and I like to classify this soil. Hey, this is what we got going on here. These are some of the issues we're having. And let's see, let's select some plant species that's specifically going to alleviate these problems, or that's going to help aid you in what you want to see as far as your goals. And again, like I said, old habits die hard. Anytime I go to a farm, this was at the Proving Grounds farm, and for the picture that is on the left, we start to see textural changes at a certain spot. But at the first, you see that first mark, that's probably about, I think that's about 4.5 inches from the soil surface. And beyond that, there was little to no soil aggregation. And so that AP layer was really influencing all the plant growth and development throughout that whole growing season. Um, but your picture on the right is a field that we started to, really heavily do cover cropping, very similar soil type, but it had a little bit more clay than on the left side. And you start to see, hey, this is after a year and a half of cover crops, and you see the earthworms, you see those type of things that are happening, which are a good sign. But that means that the above ground work is helping out what goes on below the ground. Um, and so then we try to harness the power of, like I mentioned, the below ground, is that we want to make sure the plant can do everything that it's supposed to do, and have everything that it needs to be successful. And so what we found is that with, making sure that the microbial community is trending in the right direction, these plants, that they are less, I won't say resistant to these biotic and abiotic stresses, but they're able to withstand kind of a few more hard times, is what I would say. We have seen improved yields in a lot of our fields, specifically where we are going, 100 miles an hour. But we're also starting to see healthier plants, and plants that are more resilient. As we do plant tissue samples and tissue tests, these plants, they are performing better. On the outside, they look the same, but we are seeing that nutritional content, they are performing a lot better than some of the ones that are in our conventional fields. And our conventional fields are conventional because in order to make a crop, we gotta make these changes incrementally. Like, we can't just sacrifice yield for the sake of regenerative ag. So we try to keep that balance. And And we also see these by using these biostimulants and these biofertilizers because it just helps from a holistic approach. And again, I'm not saying this saying, hey, cut out everything that you do from a conventional perspective, but figuring out ways that we can start to implement these things, not at a full scale, but where can we implement these things to make the best difference for our farming operation? And we've seen that on our farm that these applications of whether it's biostimulants or biofertilizers and pesticides, they really do help because we have trials that were being analyzed right now from this past season that are showing some improvement, and the yield was stabilized, which is good. But we're starting to see improvement in some of these soil health metrics that we can say, hey, this was directly related to a lot of these additives that we add. And wrapping up, I want to just talk about our Soil Plus program because based on everything that we did previously, that I talked about previously, we do have a program, our Soil Plus program, where we aren't taking the role of the consultant because consultants are important. And even in our proving grounds farms, we have consultants, and so we're not saying, hey, we're not taking the place of no consultants, but we like to call ourselves partners, where we partner with farmers to say, hey, I want to do something different. I want to look at regenerative ag. How can it work for me? How can it help with me? Where we provide these plans, we walk with the farmers, and we even work. We have some instances where we work with the consultants and to see what's best for the farmers. We have a digital platform where farmers can go in, they can look at their fields, they can look at some of the soil data that we have, and when you get results as we work with you, your information is there. You can pull it up from your iPhone and play around in it. But what we do is we try to make sure that farmers know that, hey, we aren't trying to take the role of a consultant, but we're trying to take the role of a partner. Because a partner and a consultant, they have different relationships, and we want to say you can have the best of both worlds. So that's our Soil Plus offering. And if you're interested in that, you can scan the QR code, you can get more. You can go to our website, Vayda.com, or you can email me directly. And I love talking to farmers. I love talking to partners. You can email me directly at tj@vayda.com. I usually don't get my email out, but I'm doing it here because I just get excited talking about plant stuff. But yeah, so tj@vayda.com, and so yeah, I like to talk about plant stuff, and I just think that this opportunity, especially with regenerative ag, and a lot of times that when people are thinking about climate smart practices and things of that nature, hey, where do I start? And so looking at these things incrementally can really take the stress off of asking, hey, where can I start? And it just decreases that pressure a little bit. So I appreciate the time, and I know we got some questions. Feel free to just send them to me.
All right, we do have a couple of questions, or we have a question from Dr. LaPortia Collins. To what extent can the regen practices you mentioned improve resilience during drought or extreme precipitation events?
That's a very good question. We've seen that just being totally transparent. If it gets to be 130 degrees for 2 weeks straight, can't nothing help you. But we have started to see that we started to see that with some of these practices, specifically cover cropping, for instance, it has delayed some of our irrigation sets within the growing season. So we were able to delay when we irrigated by almost a week and a half, almost 2 weeks, whereas other crops, they need the irrigation in. They start showing these signs of stress early on. So we have been able to mitigate, how often we had to irrigate. We haven't seen things where we have been able to completely take out an irrigation set yet because we don't have enough data, enough growing seasons to data as far as how much water we're using. But also even these extremely intense rainfall it gets. We get storms that talk about 100-year storms. We seem to get them every 2 weeks at a certain time. So we have seen instances where these cover cropping aspects, they do help infiltrate water a lot quicker, and the soil is not running off into streams and off target sites. So they do help tremendously from a significant from a significant standpoint? And that's just cover cropping. That's a good question.
Okay, our next question is from Teju Adisa Farrar. What is the best way for a farmer to figure out which regenerative practices work best in their specific region?
Another good question. Which specific practices work best for their region? I think you have to start with the farmer goals and what goals he or she may want to see on their farm, whether it's nutrient management, whether it's reducing soil loss, whether it's increasing soil productivity, to see what their goals are. But I also think you have to, again, this is the soil nerd coming out of me. I think you got to start with the soil. You have to start with you start with digging holes and looking at the soil properties, the physical soil properties, because those physical properties are going to influence and affect how these chemical properties interact with each other and how the plant interacts with them. So I think you have to start with the soil first, and then you go from there because some issues may be compaction related, they may be erosion related, but I think you start with the soil first, and then I think the next step is selecting cover crops that work best for that soil type.
Thank you, Dr. Bradford. We have two questions from Dr. Chandrea Stallworth, who is also a Mississippi State
That's
alum.
right.
It out. First question is, does Vayda develop programs to partner with CPGs to deliver GHG and regen ag benefits? That's question number one.
Yeah, so we have been in my role specifically, we do partner with entities and organizations that help kind of how should I say this, visualize some of the benefits of what we do, some of these practices. So for instance, if a CPG says, hey, we want to quantify and assess the benefits of this crop influences these practices, we do develop partnerships for those type of metrics because if we can track it and we can measure it, then I think it benefits everybody because everybody wants to know how things are produced and the magnitude that things are produced at and what are the effects of the production. And at Vayda, we have partnered with entities that help show and quantify those type of effects.
Next, second question is, have farmers expressed difficulty in sourcing cover crop seeds?
In certain aspects, yes. It depends on what species it is. I know last year on the Proving Grounds farm, I was over coordinating all the cover crop seed, every seed that was going to be planted. And midway through the year, we were looking at Balsana clover, and my rep said, "Hey man, we out of Balsana clover." And I'm like, "What you mean you out of clover? Like that's what we need." And so he was like, "Hey, we out of this." And I'm like, "Okay." So then he was like, "Hey, we're out of this." I can't remember what other species it was. Maybe it was black oats or something like that. And but farmers do come up with that. Like there sometimes there are shortage of cover crop seeds, and it's not just regional. Sometimes it could be nationwide. And also coming up with seeds at one time they might not be as expensive as they were last year, and so farmers have to pivot a little bit. So there are times where certain cover crop seed gets scarce, and you may have to go to a different source. But that is a real concern, and I mean, that's real life, and we've seen it happen for sure.
TJ, I want to piggyback off of that question.
Hmm.
Think that the difficulty in acquiring the seeds is a result of specifically increased demand now that we've seen more regen practices and climate smart commodity. I mean, like recently, the last 3 to 5 years, do you think that can be a part of it, or do you think just generally that's something that all farmers are going to have to face?
I think I think it is an issue because of the increased demand. Because even though cover crops, they aren't it in a new thing, it in a new concept, the application of them in certain regions are. So whereas you have, I've even going into earlier, was this November, going back into about March of last year. I've had cover crop producers asking me, hey, how much cover crop seed do you think you might need between you and your growers and your partners and all this? Because, we're getting demand from everywhere. And what that does, it does in turn create a shortage. And and especially not getting the species that you want. So, but I think it's a great opportunity for farmers to start looking at different sources, but also trying out different cover crop suppliers because we do get that same benefit. But I think because of the demand, yeah, and I think we'll start to see as more producers start to adopt this, it will be a little bit more of a demand on our farmers.
Okay, thank you. Now, I want to play devil's advocate a little bit.
Okay.
We can kind of demystify some of the misconceptions
Yeah.
of regen ag because
Mm-hmm.
we hear this term a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of mystery shrouded in it. There are more than one definition depending on who you're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
So, in your experience, what are some of the misconceptions about regenerative agriculture that could prevent farmers from actually wanting to do it?
That's a good question. Great question. And I go by the question that I get the most when it comes to regenerative ag is that I think the potential complexities of it. Because if we just talk about cover cropping, for instance, and I talk about, hey, what do you plant? When do you plant it? How should you plant it? And what rate should you plant it? When you got to terminate it? How long should you let it go? And will it become a weed problem? And if I get ready to terminate in February, is it gonna be too cold? Will I get a good kill? I think the potential complexities of it, kind of deters farmers because it's like, okay, now I have another input that I have to manage now because hey, we once we harvest soybean, I till that ground up, I roll it up, I drag it off, do whatever I got to do. I run my water furrows or my ditches, and I'm gonna leave it like that. So when the spring comes, that water's gonna run off, I can get in the field. Well, now you say, hey, you want me to plant a crop here, and that soil is not going to warm as fast as the bare soil. So you mean to tell me I potentially have to delay my planting date and it's going to stay wetter longer? So that's that potential about, man, this is probably going to cause me more problems than I want to sign up for. I think that's the biggest deterrent. And again, regenerative ag isn't all about just cover crop. That's just one aspect of it. So what I try to do is I try to tell farmers about the complete approach is that, hey, it's also about nutrient management as well. It's about, tillage practices, things like that. So it's more than just one approach, but making sure that this approach try to fit your production system. That's, I think, the biggest barrier and deterrent for farmers is that like this gonna be too much. I ain't trying to sign up for nothing else.
I agree because again, that's a lot for them to take on additional
Mhm.
information, additional data. And
Yeah.
so, in your experience, what are some ways that potentially we can help producers or to overcome that, um, lackluster desire to move forward full throttle? I think a lot of producers want to, and they see
Hmm.
potential benefit, but as you outlined, the complexity around it, the mystery around it is kind of making people apprehensive to move forward.
Hmm.
Overcome that. How can we help producers to understand the benefits of it?
Yeah, and I think the talking about the inputs decreasing and the prices, I think that's good, especially in a certain aspect. But I think we also have to talk about the process and making sure that the process is practical. Because if it's not practical and if it doesn't align with current values, then you kind of dead in the water. And so I like to walk producers through the practicalness of it and starting with something small. So it's like, hey, you got 2,000 acres, you got 200 acres. Let's Let me show you what's possible on 10 acres. Let me show you what's possible on 40 acres. And then you be the judge. You know what I mean? So, but I think as we start to peel back the curtain on the process, because farmers are smart people. Farmers are extremely intelligent people. They come up with ways to do things with what they have that I think other people might not be able to do. So it's like my dad, I've seen him. engineer stuff on the farm. They're like, bro, how did you get that from that? Like, I don't know how you did that. And then it works. And so I think as we open up the process, and like I said, it's a management philosophy. So open up that process and showing like, hey, it doesn't have to fit this. You tell me how you think this would work on your farm that benefits it. And I've had farmers that come up with their own spreader. I've had farmers to create their own drill, and it helps with that process. And I think that is where once we open up the process and allow that freedom and that their personality and their minds to kind of take over that, I think it'll start to spread like wildfire.
Great, great. Thank you so much. Next question from Dr. Stallworth. Has there been any interest in roller crimping cover crops for termination? So I'll let you answer that one first, and then there's a second one.
Yeah, so actually there has been, and on our farm we have a roller crimper because letting that be an alternative. So for when we do plant, get ready to plant, so we would crimp it and then plant it. We have seen some benefit of crimping and then using a subsequent herbicide application for that. But there are farmers that are in our program that have purchased a roller crimper and that they have been able to utilize that for their operations. So we have seen that beneficial aspect of it because again it is a pass across the field, but creating that mat for those cover crops to terminate creates like a living mulch almost. So it does suppress weeds. So we have seen that benefit as well. And she said, sorry for the question. Nah, keep them coming.
I know. I was just typing like no need to apologize,
Right.
the place of learning and knowledge sharing. So please, everyone, jump into the chat and continue to ask questions. Next question is, how do we help minority farmers gain access to equipment when so few grants exist for this? Now, this is a good question.
That
I'll
is a
let
good question.
I'll answer.
Um, And because I worked for the USDA for a while, and you work for the USDA for a while as well, there
Mhm.
are opportunities where you can go and ask the USDA to help to purchase a piece of equipment where it can be put out where you can utilize it. Like smaller vegetable growers use this for like transplants and things like that. So you can go to the conservation district, and if it's justifiable, they can help buy this piece of equipment, and you can utilize it. Also utilizing, different co-ops because I think that we are stronger together. Um, Having an opportunity where farmers get together and say, hey, let's all put in on this piece of equipment so we can utilize it. And I think that in turn helps with some of the adoption practices for access to a lot of this equipment. And then also a lot of current equipment can be retrofitted. You think about things like row cleaners. You can put row cleaners on a planter. You can put different sweeps on a do-all and stuff like that. You can outfit your own equipment with just modify things that farmers usually already have. Like I said, I use our farm. We created so many different implements by adding stuff from other implements. Like when we purchase implements, we'll purchase something, then we'll purchase an old one that we can use for parts, and we'll start to modify it in a way to get the same thing done. Like I said, if you want a row cleaner, we've put modified sweeps on stuff to just clean the row out, and we didn't have to purchase anything. But I would say, the local conservation district and the local NRCS offices, minority farmers, they can definitely go in and petition those conservationists to say, hey, how can we get this piece of equipment where the community can access it? That's a real good question.
And I think, to piggyback off what you mentioned about the co-op aspect of it, encouraging farmers to actually co-op their equipment, so that, farmer A can also share the equipment with farmer B and C,
Hmm.
and they share it likewise. So encouraging that. I don't
Right.
think, have so many different things that they're dealing with on a daily basis,
Hmm.
input cost of production, margins, climate change, USDA, climate smart commodities, that they don't always have the bandwidth to continue to expand around all these other things. So I think that's where, NGOs, other nonprofits like myself, or folks that are actually out there working with farmers can actually bring to those communities and say, hey, have you all considered doing an equipment trust or an
Hmm.
equipment to kind of help alleviate some of those pressures around equipment, specifically when it comes to equipment for cover crops. And that's an area that
Right.
they haven't always been operating in. So
Hmm.
is going to have these pieces of equipment laying around. So once one
Yep.
gets them, let's try to make sure that the community at large has access to it, to benefit the greater good. So that was
Right.
excellent, excellent question, Stallworth. And TJ, let's kind of
Hmm.
let's talk
Okay.
about and technology because as we know, farming agriculture is becoming very data intensive.
Hmm.
Uh, I mean, technology driven. How is Vayda leveraging technology and data to support farmers and their livelihood?
I think one of the ways that we look at that data and technology to help farmers is part of our Soil Plus offering is that when we come up with these plans, cover cropping plans, the best cover crops for this soil type, for these goals and all these type of things, we're looking at hundreds of years of weather data that we are looking at trends. And again, because I like to nerd out on stuff, when you have that much data you can start to identify certain trends, and we correlate that with plant date, termination date. How many growing degree days are going to be from here to here? And if you're going to get this amount of biomass, you need this amount of growing days. So you need to plant this day. But if you get to this date, you got to change up this species because it needs this many growing days. And so we use a lot of that data, that historical data, paired with the soil physical properties that we compare, and then you then integrate these soil chemical properties that we want to see, and then we relate them with the management practices that in turn start to influence all these things. So it's like a domino effect. Um, and because plans change, because things happen, because like here in October we didn't get a drop of rain until Halloween.
Hmm.
No precipitation fell out of the sky. So you have farmers asking, should I even plant a cover crop? And it's been dry for 3.5 weeks. Most farmers are gonna be like, I don't know if I want to put that out there. But with these plans, as they change, you look at the data, say, okay, well, if you're gonna plant November 1st, these are the crops that you probably gonna need to plant to get this amount of biomass for this amount of growing degree days. And this is the potential benefit that you will get if you terminate on this day. So I think my grandfather used to always say, when you know better, you do better. And when you know more and you have more information, you can make a different decision. And so I think the data aids us into being able to help farmers make these decisions where it's not guesswork, it's based on trends.
The data tells us fundamentals of economics. The data tells a story. Uh,
Hmm.
and I think that across all, different disciplines. So to go back and kind of follow back up with Dr. Stallworth, your question was, co-op seems so hard to establish in minority Black communities specifically. How do we educate small farmers to move towards this business model? I mean, I think you're correct. But the key behind this is it doesn't necessarily have to be a co-op. Again, it can be an equipment trust or some other type of business model or mechanism. But I think providing a clear understanding as to what the outcome of this is going to be
Hmm.
very much beneficial to the producers, and helping them to understand why this is important and how this could impact the community at large, on a deeper scale. But you're right, it doesn't necessarily have to be a co-op. You can look at other business models as well. I just think the education component of it is going to be key. And that means actually, bringing a group of producers together, walking them through the process, helping them to understand how it could actually work, and bringing some success stories. Those
Hmm.
are always ways to motivate other farmers to say, hey, I did it. Farmer A did it, Farmer B did it, and they were successful. And here's how it can work and be successful to your community as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's right.
Any additional questions? Don't be shy. Uh, Dr. Bradford has a wealth of knowledge and information as we see from his presentation. So we want to take advantage of the time that we have with him. We have like about 4 minutes left.
Yeah. And I like questions. I enjoy just dialogue. So, and I feel like with things like this, like regenerative ag, and where there's precision ag, there's nutrient management. Sometimes just having a dialogue opens up a whole different realm of possibilities and ways that we can collaborate just from having dialogue. So yeah, all questions are welcome.
All right, going once, going twice. Is there a resource? So this is from Ronitha Darrett. Is there a resource you would highly encourage to read on this topic?
Oh yes, matter of fact, I'm looking at my bookshelf now, and I
Okay.
don't know if it's up here or not. Oh my goodness, I don't see it on my bookshelf up here. There is. I will shoot an email to you so to let you know what book that is because I cannot. Now, had you not asked me about it, I would have been able to give it to you right now. Oh yeah, here it is. Um, Building soils for better crops. Uh-oh, let me take this blurred background off here so you can see it. Building better soils for better crops, ecological management for healthy soils. This is the fourth edition. I don't know that they have a newer edition yet, but this is the Southern Sustainable Agriculture Research and Education. This is their publication, but it is a phenomenal resource, and it doesn't matter if you've been farming for 20 years or you've never farmed a day in your life. The way that it's written, it gives great information about cover crops, information about soil health, tillage practices, all those type of things. And so, like I said, it's a wonderful book. And whether you grow vegetables or you grow soybeans, like it's written in a way where anybody can understand it. So that's a great book.
Thank you, Dr. Bradford. I'm going to share my screen. We have a few announcements before we. So we want to thank Dr. Bradford for being with us and joining us today. Again, I really appreciate it. I always learn a lot from our conversations, but we do appreciate you for taking the time this afternoon to speak with the audience. Our next webinar is wholesale opportunities at procurement companies. That will be December the 3rd at 1:30 to 2:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. Thank you to everyone for joining us this afternoon, our attendees, our special guests. Please feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions. Also, Dr. Bradford's email is in the chat, and as well as Vayda, visit Vayda at Vayda.com if you have additional questions. And please remember that we will be sending out this recording and letting everyone know when it is posted. Have a great afternoon, everyone. And be sure to reach out to us if you have any additional questions. Thank you again, Dr. Bradford. We really appreciate you at Freedmen Heirs Foundation.
Very welcome. Thank you all for having me.
Absolutely.